I wanted to kind of describe today is some of our research at the National Institutes of Health involving both mathematical modeling of human metabolism and body weight and body composition change, as well as some experimental studies that we've done that combine our modeling work along with measurements in real people undergoing a weight loss intervention. So maybe I can start with the first slide, which is labeled slide 2 on the bottom right. And basically, when I started my lab at the NIH, my background is in physics, and I was interested in trying to use my mathematical skills to try to better understand human metabolism. And so I had this idea that maybe I could build a mechanistic model of the physiology of human metabolism so that at the top of this slide you can see the inputs to the model would be food intake. So we could vary the carbohydrate, the fat, and the protein in the diet, and vary the amount of physical activity. And then if we had a mathematical model of metabolism that was actually trying to simulate the physiology, then we could make predictions about how changes in the inputs to the model, such as the food intake and physical activity, alter things like the fuels that are being burned by the body on the left-hand side, the carbohydrate, the fat oxidation, and nitrogen excretion as a measure of protein balance. And how would those changes in fuel selection then lead to imbalances between the amount of food or the carbohydrates and the fats and the proteins that are coming in and what's being used to fuel metabolism. That would lead to an imbalance, which would result in changes in body composition, body weight, the lean mass, the fat mass of the body, as well as the body water, method by Benedict in the early part of the 20th century. It was a study of fasting in a single person. It turns out that for some strange reason back in this time period, it used to be fashionable for people to starve themselves for other people's entertainment. So there were professional fasters, something called hunger artists. And this was one person who was a professional hunger artist, and he volunteered to be studied over the course of his fast. And this is a person who started out as about 60-kilogram man, so not an obese man by any stretch of the imagination. And his intent was to fast for 31 days, consuming only water. And the data points here are the measurements, and the curve is the model. So what we did was we started off the model at the 60 kilograms. This person overate for a couple of days before the fast, but we knew what he ate, so we fed the person what he ate for those 2 days. And then we cut all of the food intake in the model, and we compare the blue curve with the black data points for this one person. You can see that there's a reasonable correspondence between the model and this person moved from primarily burning carbohydrates to burning fat and ketones. And so these are model predictions, and we don't have direct data to compare these two. But what we can do is we can transform these model predictions into something that we can compare with data. We know the amount of oxygen and CO2, carbon dioxide, that is produced when you burn carbohydrate, fat, and protein. And so we can make predictions about what the oxygen consumption rate and carbon dioxide production rate should be over the course of this fast. And the next slide shows the respiratory quotient. And that's similar to the fasting situation. When these people were put on this very low energy diet, the number of calories that are being burned, that's the blue curve here in total, is dropping from above 3,000, is dropping by several hundred calories a day quite quickly. Over the first 4 weeks, it drops substantially. And a large chunk of that is due to the resting metabolic rate dropping, which is in red. And the dynamic weight loss phase, there's a measurement of resting metabolic rate. That's that triangle at about 12 weeks in. And then during the ramp up to achieve weight stability, you can see that energy expenditure goes up again when weight is maintained at that 10% decrease in body weight. And then subsequently, when the energy intake goes down again to about 800 calories a day, the energy expenditure rate drops again quite rapidly, and then returns, albeit to a lower level at the end of the experiment when the 20% weight loss is achieved. So the point here is two things. Number one, that the data points are matching the curves, which are the curves are the model simulations. The boxes and triangles are the data points. And the second thing is that the model is predicting these very dynamic changes in calories being burned as a function of both the weight change itself as well as the number of calories that are being taken in. And that those changes in the calories being burned or expended are due to both changes in resting metabolic rate as well as changes in the energy cost of physical activity. In the next slide, slide 14, you can see the corresponding changes in body weight and body composition in terms of fat mass and fat-free mass that was observed in the experiment, and the curves are the model simulations, again illustrating that there's a reasonably good match between the predictions of the model and what was actually observed. So this is an example of another example of validating that the model is accurately predicting the experimental results of a controlled feeding study over an extended period of time in obese subjects. So we have one example I've shown you for a lean subject who's fasting, and another example says of obese subjects who are here. Initially, you can see 130 kilos or so to start, is accurately matching the metabolic and body composition changes that occur when you change these people's diets. So slide 15. I don't know if people have this television program, we have this television program in the United States. I believe it's in several other places around the world now, which is a competition, a weight loss competition called The Biggest Loser. It's televised, plotting the percent weight change. The first 14 weeks are these folks staying isolated on this ranch in Malibu, California, where they do, like I mentioned, 3 hours per day, at least, of vigorous physical exercise. You can see that by the end of this 14-week period, folks have lost almost 30% of their body weight, and then they all lose primarily fat mass. So at week 30, for example, these folks lost only about 18% of their body weight came from lean mass, and the vast majority, of approximately a little less than 85%, came from fat mass, which I'll show you in a moment is quite different than what happens when people undergo lumbar bariatric surgery. So these folks actually preserve their fat-free mass to a very large degree over the course of this 30-week intervention. Next slide, please. So here what I'm doing is I'm showing you, okay, these folks were doing both diet and exercise. What would have happened if they just done the diet or just done the exercise? These are predictions, of course, because we have no idea what would really happen with no data to address this. But because the model works well in both diet and exercise, it's a reasonable speculation. And so on the left side, I'm showing you the changes in body weight in the black bar and the changes in fat mass in the open bar, white bar, that would be predicted just based on diet alone. And what you can see is that in this case, upward is coming from lean tissue. So they're losing quite a bit of weight with just that diet and not doing the exercise. But a large chunk of that weight loss is coming from loss of fat-free mass or lean tissue. Whereas in the case where they kept the original diet, what happened with this metabolic adaptation, that's that falling off that regression curve that I showed on the previous slide. In the Biggest Loser group of 13 subjects compared with the retrospectively matched group of Wu-on-Y bariatric surgery. And you can see that the suppression of resting metabolic rate is quite high at 7 months in the Biggest Loser group, as we mentioned, about approximately 500 calories per day, more than was expected based on the body composition change. This was similar to what's observed after 6 months of bariatric surgery. But at that time point, the bariatric surgery folks had lost much less weight than the Biggest Loser group. At 12 months, after the bariatric surgery, they'd actually lost the same amount of weight as the Biggest Loser group. And by that point in time, the metabolic adaptation had decreased substantially. When we look at the next slide, we made a prescription and made a prediction about what their body weight should be. You monitor their weight and physical activity. You calculate what their actual intake change must have been. And then you provide that as feedback to the people who are undergoing the intervention and give them an idea of where they actually have hit their target or missed their target. So for example, on slide 44, you could begin the feedback control process. Tell these folks that actually you have lost adherence to the diet, you're going to have to do something different from now on in order to get back on track. And slide 45 shows that you could then continuously monitor the intervention and give them feedback about what they're actually doing. Because one of the things that we now know is it's very hard for people to understand how much of a change in calorie intake they've actually achieved. When you ask them to report what they've achieved, they can't accurately do it. And so you could use a model to provide this as ongoing feedback. This is the basis of a patent application that we submitted earlier in 2013. And we're trying to apply this in various settings now at the NIH. So I'm glad you stuck with me for this talk. The next slide is my final slide with my thank yous for various folks who've been involved in these studies. And thanks for your attention. I'm happy to have some discussion and answer questions.
Thank you, Kevin.